Hello and welcome back to Power to the People with me, Graeme Pryce. Well, this is a first. I have already made a video of this nature about Nigel Farage and admitted him to the 5 Reasons Hall of Fame, or infamy, I suppose. But the man is just so deceitful, abhorrent and insidious, even to his followers, that I really felt it was time to take another look at him. He hadn't been elected last time I gave my excoriating critique of his sheer twattery, and was still just lingering in the background of politics, as welcome as a fart in a lift or a slug on your salad. But not anymore. We're now at the point where the bollock-faced foghorn of ignorance has seemingly moved himself into a position where he genuinely believes he might be the next Prime Minister, as do a lot of his fuck-witted followers. And they might not be wrong. I still believe sheer common sense and hopefully tactical voting will save us from a similar era of shame and incompetence as we're witnessing in America, as their democracy falls into greed-fueled idiocracy. But I'm by no means certain. So let's have a look at 5 more reasons why I think Nigel Farage is definitely a twat. 'Tis Power to the People with Graeme Pryce, where sometimes he's naughty or nice. If you like the vibe, hit like and subscribe. But don't hit the like button twice. Thank you. Nigel is a man that likes the finer things in life. He's a man with a Coots bank account for the extremely wealthy, and he intends to stay that way, remember. But areas where people have wealth, can afford private education, have 3 cars on the drive and live a life of opulence, don't tend to vote reform very often. Now, it's downtrodden areas with poor educational standards and a populace of angry, easily fooled and gullible gammon rages where reform succeeds. Places where it's easy to make impoverished people angry, and even easier to lie to them, because they're likely looking no further into politics than what they see on Facebook, Twitter and GB News. Sorry, GBBs. Just as Trump said he loves the poorly educated, Nigel loves the easily misinformed. So Clacton on Sea, one of the most deprived areas in the country, was ripe for his type of bullshit. He didn't want to live there though. Fuck that. No. Just as Richard Tice, Reform MP for Skegness, lives in Dubai, Nigel Farage had no intention of living in Clacton when he was elected. But if he's sensitive to anything, it's public opinion, and he hates to be made a fool of. So, in response to people who were rightly pointing out that he is quite absent in Clacton, almost as absent as hope and prosperity are there, he bought a house there. It was the poshest and most expensive he could find on the market quickly, obviously. He probably thinks 2 up and 2 downs with a cupboard under the stairs only exist in Harry Potter novels. But regardless, he now claims Clacton is his main residence after moving into a house worth just shy of £1 million. A lot of money, that, innit? But it's okay, because he didn't pay for it. His latest girlfriend did. A lady with a name that sounds a bit like her parents were too posh to remember how to spell Laura. Her name is Ferrari. No relation to Nick Ferrari, apparently. Laura describes herself as a political activist, but has never declared any great amount of financial capital. Yet she somehow came up with over £885,000 to buy a home in Clacton. You see, despite how arrogantly deceptive Nigel Farage continually proves to be, you just can't hide some transactions. There's no way Ferrari could have afforded that house, and questions are rightfully being asked about where this magnificent sum of cash came from. Those of us who haven't got reform-coloured shit in our eyes know exactly where it came from. But why didn't Nigel just buy the house himself instead of giving the money to so she could buy it? Well, There's probably a lot more to come out about this, but it seems obvious that he was attempting to avoid stamp duty, amongst other things. Remember when Angela Rayner was accused of doing something similar, but on a much, much, much lesser scale, and the papers hounded her for weeks? If you ever needed evidence of the sheer sycophantic bias of the right wing in this country and the right wing media, this is it. They crucified Angela Rayner for doing something vaguely similar on a much lesser level, but Nigel does it in the Daily Mail and the Telegraph and the Sun. Barely bothered to mention it, and if they do, they're mentioning it in his defence. What a fucking shocker, eh? I think the best way for me to proceed with this example of our pound shop Enoch Powell's twattery is for me to relay a little anecdote, a story of impotent rage and unserendipitous stupidity on the part of one of Nigel's many buffoonish followers. Despite the fact that I despise pretty much every social media except YouTube, I do have a Facebook page for the channel. Unfortunately, I get battered with reform and MAGA shite on it every day because the algorithms notice that it's about politics. That's probably something for another video. I came across a person in a comment section that was just utterly moronically right-wing and was attempting to share the complete and total bollocks that they'd been fooled into believing with all of their audience. This particular cotton wool-brained ignoramus was relaying one that we've all heard before. I used to be a lifelong Labour voter, but now... Except the reason he was claiming that he was now a reform tard were ridiculously stupid, but foremost among them was apparently because Starmer is getting all his clothes and spectacles for free. It proves he's just another freeloader. Well, I do think Keir Starmer's a bit of a shit Prime Minister. He's more Theresa May or John Major than he is Tony Blair. But I was pretty annoyed by that, knowing what I know about Nigel Farage. So I had a look at the guy's profile before answering, and sure enough, it was covered in Reform UK shite. Pathetic AI videos trying to mock Labour people doing various gross things, and praise for Nigel Farage. I didn't jump in immediately though. I wanted to be sure of the effectiveness of the ammunition I intended to use to shoot this cretin down with. You probably know where I'm going with this. Nigel Farage has received more freebies since taking office than any other member of Parliament. Just the stuff he's actually declared comes to over £2 million worth of freebies. It's not even hard to find out, and it isn't a biased left-wing view. It's recorded by the House of Commons and the official government records. And while it may be stanky with the stench of Tories and reform in there, it's still an irrefutable and viable reference source for now. Imagine the favours you must be promising to do people for them to give you £2 million worth of stuff in a year. Imagine the lobbying, the corruption, the extortion you'd have to be involved in to be given over £2 million worth of bribes, gifts in a year. What is Nigel Farage promising he will do for these people if he gets into office to receive that amount? I posted a few links for the daft fucker who was still raging about Starmer getting a free pair of specs. And I never got a reply. As usual, when you try to tell these people actual facts, they didn't want to know. Tumbleweeds and crickets. Shocker. I think Nigel Farage is one of the most dangerous and deceitful individuals that politics in this country has ever seen. Before he started screaming from the rooftops about the EU, it was practically unheard of for a normal average bloke in the street to give two shits about the EU. Polls done in late 2000s show that just 1% of people were concerned in some way about being part of the second largest economy in the world. Just 1% thought that we were involved with some evil, sovereignty-stealing entity. You could go for a drive around the country and not see one tatty shipping container on the edge of a farmer's field with vote leave sprayed badly on the side. Nigel Farage changed that. And let's remember, back at that time, he was actually a member of the European Parliament, a position for which he will be paid a pension for the rest of his life. But apart from farmers, there was another section of our society that Farage managed to cast his frog-like visage amongst and manipulate the knowledge, beliefs and attitudes of the decent people within. And it's the fishing industry. Even today, if there is some sort of protest at a coastal village, somewhere that shouts loud enough and is in an area deprived enough to have a large amount of refuckers, you can be certain Nigel will dress up in his "I'm a common man of the people" outfit and show up to tell everybody how angry they should be, and probably to tell them that it's all the fault of immigrants as well. So Nigel must really care about the fishing industry, mustn't he? Doesn't seem to hold up to scrutiny if you look at it a bit deeper though. You see, Nigel was actually part of the European Parliament's Fisheries Committee before he fooled the UK into leaving the EU. And during his tenure, there were 42 meetings. How many of those meetings do you think Nigel Farage turned up to? 40? Well, surely he wouldn't miss them, would he? He really cares about the fishing industry. No. 30? Surely he managed half of the meetings at least and went to just over 20, right? No. He attended 2. He turned up twice out of 42 meetings. Yet the plastic patriot twat was a regular at fishing protests during the Brexit campaign, turning up to whip up the misinformed into a frenzy of vote leave ignorance. I guess he never opened one of his speeches at those protests by saying, "I had the opportunity to be deeply involved in your future by representing you at over 40 meetings of the European Parliament Fisheries Committee. But I couldn't really be arsed. Now, have you all got your poppies on? The Muslims are going to take them off you." How far do you think he'd go if he'd stood there and told them that? But that's the truth. Fucking charlatan. Labour, and Starmer in particular, face a continual onslaught of misinformation, not just from social media, but from the right-wing press also. As I've said, Starmer could personally give everybody in the country a free house and end homelessness overnight, and the Daily Mail headlines would be, "Starmer destroys the housing market." He could give everybody in the country £1,000 gold ingot, and the Telegraph would have headlines the next day saying, "Starmer ruins the gold standard." I don't ever watch GBBs, but if you do, can you ever remember hearing them say anything good about anything Labour have ever done? Labour don't help themselves by apparently thinking they're still in opposition with regard to their communications strategy either. They have a huge majority and could easily make sweeping changes and draw the attention of every media outlet every day, but instead they seem just quietly intent on being shite. One of the best things they have done though is to introduce their workers' rights bill. It gives more rights to workers from day one of their employment than ever before in history, especially those trapped in 0-hour contracts and those facing unfair dismissal. It guarantees rights on sick pay and maternity leave that the Tories would never have dreamt to give to the plebs and the peasants, and it strengthens unions. So, of course, the Tories voted against it, but you can sort of expect that. Politics has become a polemic battle of partisan piss-taking, remember. And most of those on the right consider it far more important to win a vote, or at least oppose one, than to actually do something in the interests of their constituents. A small party of just 5 MPs shouldn't really have to think like that, though. They're going to have no effect whatsoever against the decision making of a government with a majority the size of Labour's. And so they should barely consider themselves free to vote with their conscience on most issues. All 5 Reform MPs voted against the Workers' Rights Bill. Frankly, Farage and his fog-brained fantasists have barely even bothered to turn up for any of the debates about your workers' rights. But he's voted against the bill himself and instructed his MPs, to do so as well. What a man of the people, eh? I was tempted to talk about the NHS and Nigel's utter scorn for it in this section, but while researching some of the fuck-witted twattery he was involved in during the Brexit farce, I was reminded of Theresa May's ill-fated 2017 election. You remember, the strong and stable one that resulted in the weakest and most unstable government in living memory. The one where she was doing quite well, to be fair, until she literally started attacking people with dementia and fell apart in interviews by just repeat strong and stable over and over again. Yeah, that one. There was one more thing that sealed the deal for a lot of people and resulted in Madden strong and stable sinking into oblivion with a minority government propped up by Irish religious zealots, though. It was when she came forward and fully threw her support behind fox hunting. There's a few reasons why fox hunting is abhorrent to most people, but most obvious is the idea of a wild animal being chased until it literally drops to the ground with exhaustion and then being ripped apart by the jaws of a pack of barking, screaming, bloodthirsty hounds. Foxes are intelligent creatures with complex lives and social habits. Most people rarely see them, partly because they're nocturnal, but also partly because the population's actually in quite serious decline. The red fox population in the UK has dropped 48% since the mid-90s. With this in mind, Labour introduced the fox hunting ban in 2004, which is widely ignored by posh twats on £50,000 horses every Boxing Day, who are seldom prosecuted for flagrantly breaking the law, but still, it has reduced the amount of foxes being torn apart by the snapping jaws of Lord Twattingly Ponsington Smythe's hunting hounds. It works to an extent, though it's far from perfect, and it has huge support among the UK population, which is why it surprises me that Nigel Farage openly admits he would repeal that law and allow privileged inbred Tarquins to rampage across the countryside, torturing the wildlife to death again. Nigel has said he doesn't think the grotesque spectacle of a sentient and pain-feeling creature being torn to pieces by baying, snapping jaws, while a load of twats in red coats and tweed prance about on horses quaffing champagne is actually cruel. Apparently it's not cruel, that now. In fact, you won't hear from Nigel on Boxing Day, as he almost always joins the Boxing Day hunt in his home territory of Kent. I suspect few Reform voters will have gotten this far into the video, but if there are any, I want you to stop and ask yourself a question. Why, when Theresa May suggested bringing back fox hunting, were you so appalled and you considered it to be so abhorrent and disgusting that it lost her your vote? But not when Nigel Farage does it. When Nigel Farage does it, you either pretend you don't know, just don't care, or change the subject when it's brought up. What's the difference? What changed? Was it you? Because it certainly wasn't Nigel. How many common men of the people do you know that spend Boxing Day hunting with the hounds and trumpets dressed in tweed on horseback? Answers in the comments. I'll wait. Thank you for watching if you've gotten this far. I don't think there's an awful lot more that I should say here. I don't want to go on to another diatribe because we all know that the people that really should see this video have a very short attention span. I need to try and keep it as minimal as possible. There's a long way to go before an election, and I do still have faith that a lot of people will see Farage for the plastic patriot and chancing charlatan that he is before then. He's certain that he's going to become Prime Minister using the same tactics that Trump used in America. But judging by the state of America, after less than a year of the fondling father being the first ever exposed pedo president, the place is collapsing fast, and he is literally the least popular American president in history. Let's hope he's the rock that drags Farage down with him, bloody Mango Mussolini. But we all know there will be a hardcore of refuckers that called Theresa May the Wicked Witch of the West for her supporting fox hunting, but have somehow had their brains boiled in the meantime and now think it's fine for Farage to join the Boxing Day hunt. They're Britain's MAGA, and they will reject the evidence of their eyes and ears until it puts them in the grave. If you want to try and help me make sure those people don't get into government, then the links to PayPal, Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee page are in the descriptions box, stroking live foxes. And the join button for memberships is, as always, below. Now that isn't all I have to say. Certainly not about Farage, anyway. But it is as much of what I've got to say as I'm going to say today. Ta-ra. These little bits are always unscripted, but for once I've actually thought of an idea here. Let's see how many people get this far in the video. If you've gotten all the way to the end here, leave a little fox emoji in the comments. Cheers.